Okay, let's dive into a story that's both globally massive and really surprisingly personal. We're talking Huawei.
The tech giant, yeah. And specifically, the journey of its founder, Ren Zhengfei.
Exactly. And we're digging into this using a really interesting article from an IT journalist, someone who's spent a lot of time understanding Chinese tech.
Right, and that perspective is key here. It gives some valuable context on how this company actually got to where it is today.
Absolutely. So, our mission in this deep dive is basically to pull out the crucial insights from this piece. We want to get a handle on Huawei's scale now, sure, but also the man who started it all and, the whole complex global discussion around them.
And like you said, the starting point, his personal background is, well, it's incredibly challenging. It really sets the stage.
A real story of survival, it sounds like.
Definitely. Let's unpack it.
So, starting with today, where does this article place Huawei now? What's the scale we're talking about?
Well, the article is pretty clear. They are the world's largest telecommunications equipment vendor, period.
So, all the infrastructure behind our phones, the internet, they're the biggest player.
Globally, yes. Building the backbone, essentially.
And it goes beyond just the infrastructure, right? Because most people probably know them for their phones.
Uh-huh. And the article points that out, too. Third largest globally in smartphone market share, right behind, Samsung and Apple.
Okay, so a massive presence in consumer tech as well.
Definitely. And the financials the article mentions really drive home the scale. $107 billion in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah. That puts them third globally among IT companies, just behind Amazon and Alphabet.
Third, ahead of.
Well, the journalist notes that's nearly double Facebook's revenue.
Double Facebook's revenue. Okay, that puts things in perspective.
It really does. And it changes how people talk about Chinese tech. We often hear about BAT, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent.
Right, the big three.
But the article suggests that's shifting. Huawei's revenue, it says, actually exceeds the combined revenue of Alibaba and Tencent. Yep. So because of that sheer size, and maybe Baidu's performance lately, people are now talking more about Huawei, Alibaba, Tencent.
Icheteo, okay. So Huawei's dominance is really reshaping that landscape.
It underscores just how huge and central they've become, yeah.
Now, that kind of global scale, it inevitably attracts attention, right? And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, maybe in Japan or the US, that attention really peaked during the whole US exclusion movement.
Yes, that's definitely when the global conversation got very heated. And you saw lots of reports linking the founder, Ren Zhengfei's, past in the People's Liberation Army.
China's military.
Right, linking that to concerns about, potential ties to the government or the military.
And the article tackles this, but maybe from a different angle, focusing on the tech itself.
Exactly. It kind of steps back from specific accusations and looks at the fundamental capability. The journalist points out that communication gear in smartphones, they inherently can collect data. Think about it. Your own phone, iPhone, or Android, it collects data for quality improvements and stuff. That capability is built in.
So it's about the potential of the technology, not necessarily proven action in this specific case, according to the source.
That seems to be the angle, yes. And they add context, mentioning the Edward Snowden leaks back in 2013.
Right, about the NSA.
Yeah, showing the governments do use this kind of technical capability to access data. So the article sort of concludes that given this inherent potential, it's understandable why the U.S. might be wary of technology from another major power, like China, being in critical infrastructure.
Less about definitively labeling Huawei a tool of the PLA and more about the caution arising from what the technology could do.
That's the gist of the journalist's conclusion here. The caution stems from that potential, that capability inherent in the devices themselves. It raises bigger questions about trust in digital infrastructure, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, let's pivot hard now. Back to the very beginning. The founder, Ren Zhengfei. What does the article tell us about him? Born 1944, so 75 when this was written.
Yeah, his origins were extremely poor. Born in a small village, way up in the mountains of Guizhou province, very remote.
Parents were teachers there?
Yeah, school teachers. So educated, relatively speaking, for the time and place, but financially, very little security.
And the article stresses this wasn't just, modest means, it was real poverty.
Oh, absolutely. He was the oldest of 7 kids. The family genuinely struggled for food. He's quoted saying he literally remembers never eating his fill as a child.
Never eating his fill.
Wow. And he says that theme, just how to eat, was basically his biggest concern, his driving thought for a long, long time.
That's powerful. But despite that hardship, his father pushed education.
He did. The article describes the father as an intellectual involved in earlier political movements. He told Ren Zhengfei, knowledge is power. Even if others don't learn, you must. Saw it as the only way out.
So Ren Zhengfei really leaned into that.
Totally. Studied incredibly hard, apparently.
Hmm.
Saw university as the escape route. Managed to get into what's now Chongqing University in '63 to study architecture.
Which must have been a huge deal for the family.
Massive. Parents saved, borrowed money just to make it happen. But he didn't stop there.
Oh.
While doing architecture, he was teaching himself electronic computing, advanced math, philosophy, foreign languages, all in his dorm.
Really? Just driven by this thirst for knowledge.
Seems like it. Building this really broad base, even back then.
But he graduated right into a very difficult time in China.
Yeah, the Cultural Revolution was in full swing. Chaos. No jobs for graduates.
Yeah.
So the article says he joined the PLA, the Army, as an architecture soldier.
Building things.
Yeah, airplane factory, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't ambition. It was, as the article puts it, out of necessity to eat. Pure survival again.
And even in the army, things were tough because of his family.
Really tough. His father was imprisoned during the Cultural Revolution, labeled a counter-revolutionary because of past political stuff.
Oh, wow.
And because Ren Zhengfei was the child of a criminal, he faced serious discrimination in the PLA. The article states he was never evaluated, never promoted, didn't matter how well he did. His background basically blocked him.
And the article gives some context on the Cultural Revolution itself.
It does, yeah. Calls it a madness. Mao trying to purge enemies, encouraging people to denounce each other, intellectuals, wealthy people targeted, lots of cultural destruction, suspicion, people jailed or killed often for, flimsy reasons. Ren Zhengfei lived right through that.
So he survives the Cultural Revolution in the army, but then another setback hits.
Right. When it ends, the PLA downsizes massively around 1982. And guess who's among the first to be let go? Ren Zhengfei. Likely because of that family background still haunting him.
Back to square one, needing to find work.
Pretty much. He finds a job, VP at a tiny electronics factory, maybe 20 people, part of a state-owned group called South Sea. But the company was apparently broke, no real work going on.
Not exactly a promising start.
And then it got worse. He made a huge business mistake, got tricked in a deal, lost 2 million yuan.
2 million back then, that must have been astronomical.
Absolutely catastrophic. The article mentions the average urban salary was under 100 yuan a month then. He later said he was just naive and lacked business knowledge.
And the fallout.
Immediate. Forced to resign as VP. And right around this same terrible time, his wife asks for a divorce.
Laid off, fired after a massive loss, divorce, just one thing after another.
Yeah. And he still had his 2 kids, his parents, 6 younger siblings, all depending on him. He said, I had to find a way to feed them. Total desperation.
And that is what led to Huawei.
Directly. According to the article, that's the origin story.
Yeah.
1987, cornered, no other options seemingly left. He scrapes together 20,000 yuan with 5 colleagues from that old company, South Sea.
Just 20,000 yuan.
Yeah, a tiny amount even then to start a tech company. And he's very explicit, the article quotes him, just to survive. No grand vision, no ambition to build a giant. It was solely to stay alive. The only way out he saw.
Incredible. From just trying to survive to, well, what we see today. Those early days must have been rough.
Oh, the article paints a picture. Super rough. They sold anything they could get their hands on initially. Diet pharmaceuticals. Seriously considered selling gravestones at one point. Just trying to make payroll, basically.
So when did they find their focus? What was the actual opportunity?
They zeroed in on digital telephone switches. China was starting to modernize its phone systems, but had no domestic makers. Everything was imported from Europe, expensive.
Ah, okay. So they saw a gap, but importing wasn't the answer for them either.
No, they tried importing via Hong Kong, but the middlemen took such big fees there was almost no profit left for Huawei. So Ren Zhengfei made a huge call.
To build their own.
Exactly. Reverse engineer the imported ones. Take them apart, figure them out, and build a cheaper Chinese version.
That sounds ambitious, given where they were. Where did they even do this work?
Their first research institute in 1991, the article describes it vividly. It was just a rented apartment building in Shenzhen.
An apartment building.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a lab. It was the factory, the canteen, and the dorms, all crammed in together.
How did that even work?
Harshly. 50 employees. Only 10 beds. They slept in shifts. Ren Zhengfei's own office was just a mattress on the floor.
A mattress on the floor. That's hard to picture now.
Right. From that to a global leader. Their first switches were pretty basic, only handled like 24 lines.
So small customers?
Yeah, hospitals, mines, places that needed something cheap and weren't getting attention from the big guys.
When did they get their big break, product-wise?
In 1994, they developed the CNC08A switch. It handled way more lines, and critically, it cost half as much as the foreign competition.
Half the price. That's a huge advantage. Did the big state phone companies jump on it?
Not right away, no. The article says they were still hesitant, didn't trust this little upstart company, so Huawei got clever.
How so?
They went hard after the small rural phone companies all across China. Those guys were totally ignored by the big international vendors and were desperate for affordable equipment.
Target the underserved market. Smart. Almost a guerrilla tactic.
Exactly. And it worked brilliantly. The switches proved themselves reliable out in the countryside. Once they had that track record, the bigger city phone companies started to gain confidence and buy them too.
And that was the launching pad.
That was the core. From switches, they expanded. Communication gear, pagers, eventually mobile phones, and then the smartphones we know today.
So looking back at that whole journey, what does the article identify as Huawei's main strength now, their competitive edge?
It points very strongly to one thing: massive, sustained investment in R&D, research and development.
Pouring money back into innovation.
A huge amount. The article suggests they reinvest a very large chunk of their profits year after year back into R&D. It's like a fundamental part of their DNA.
And their structure allows that, right, being private.
That's key, according to the article. Because they're not publicly listed, they don't have that constant pressure from shareholders demanding short-term profits every quarter.
Like Western tech companies often do.
Right. They use the Chinese LLC structure, which gives them the freedom to make those really long-term bets on R&D without worrying about the stock price day to day.
The article also mentions decision-making, which can seem complicated from the outside, rotating CEOs and things.
Yeah, it acknowledges the system is complex.
Yeah.
But it states that ultimately the company's internal rules allow Ren Zhengfei and the chairman, Sun Yafang, to effectively make the key strategic calls.
So strong leadership influence combined with that R&D focus.
That's the combination highlighted as a major strength. It allows for speed, unique strategic choices, all fueled by that massive R&D engine enabled by being private.
And the physical result of all that R&D investment today, it's like a world away from that first apartment lab.
Oh, absolutely. A stark contrast. The article mentions their huge research campus in Dongguan, near Shenzhen. It's massive, like 28 Tokyo Domes big.
28 Tokyo Domes.
Yeah. And it's famously designed to look like a series of European castles.
Yeah.
It's almost unbelievable thinking back to that mattress on the floor.
That journey is just incredible. From a founder literally trying to figure out how to feed his family, starting with barely anything in a tiny apartment, to this global tech leader building castle-like research centers.
It really is. This deep dive into the article highlights that story. Resilience from poverty, smart strategy born from necessity, like targeting those rural markets, and a unique company structure built for relentless R&D. All happening against the backdrop of complex technology and global scrutiny.
Definitely. And looking at it through this lens, reading the source material, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How does that deep history, the founder's personal struggle, the company's desperate beginnings, its private structure, how might that shape its appetite for risk, its patience, its whole long-term strategy compared to its publicly traded rivals?
It's a fascinating question. Gives you a whole different way to look at the company and its place in the world. Something to really mull over.